So how to reverse engineer malware? The first step in reverse engineering malware is asking the question, what is reverse engineering? So reverse engineering is essentially a technique whereby you try to understand the internal structure of a program by looking at it from the outside. When we want to reverse engineer malware, we need to know that there are different types of malware. There's, for example, the keylogger. Once the malware is installed, it will try to intercept everything you type on your keyboard and send it to a central server. So in case you try to log into Facebook, it will record all your keystrokes and then will determine that you typed as username and as password a certain amount of text. Besides the keylogger, you have also a botnet. So a botnet will try to spread it's malware which try to spread itself across a lot of computers, and all those computers, once they get infected, they communicate with a central server, and this central server sends comments back to one of its victims. And sometimes there are botnets with like millions and millions of computers, and they most commonly use it to create spam or to DDoS a certain company. So that's mainly what a botnet is. Then we have a worm. Now you might ask yourself, why do you put a picture of a worm? It's because a worm eventually tries to infiltrate or has a certain target it wants to attack, and to do that it needs to infiltrate in between different networks to eventually reach that target. Most of the time worms are quite advanced malware. So to reverse engineer malware, we also need to build a malware lab. So what do we require for a malware lab? In general, there are three things. We need to have an operating system. It can either be Windows, Linux, Mac, or some other variant. So we need to have an operating system in the form of an ISO file or some form of an image file. And then we need to have some software on which we're going to run this, virtualized, on which we're going to run this operating system. And this virtualization software should not be able to connect to the internet, or at least should not be able to connect to other computers in your own internal network. Otherwise, if you analyze malware, it can infect this virtual machine and then try to spread itself across your network. And then at last we have the analysis tools. So mainly you will need a debugger, could be only DBG, a deobfuscator. So it's essentially a program to, if malware is written in .NET, with a deobfuscator you can easily determine what was the code that was used to create a program, what was the source code. And then at last we have the compiler. Sometimes when you deobfuscate malware, it tries to deobfuscate a password in some piece of code, in some block of code, and then you want to rerun that block of code in a compiler and see what is the output of it, because it can be very obfuscated. So those are the main requirements to reverse engineer malware. In the next video I will be showing you from a more practical perspective how to set up a malware lab.